welcome. My name is UDUAGHAN and you're watching Delta Beyond Oil. Now, according to Delta State Government, almost 10 billion naira was lost as floods ravaged 14 local governments in the state last year. And of course, this was a major setback to the state's infrastructural renewal projects. Now, as the state gets back on its feet, we will take a look at some of the key projects that will spur development in its infrastructural sector. Words like crippled, neglect and decay have often been used to describe the state of infrastructure in the Niger Delta region, an area which produces over 2 million barrels of Nigeria's crude oil per day. According to a 2006 report by the United Nations Development Programme, the surrounding region, including Delta State, suffered from prevalent crumbling of social infrastructure and services as a result of years of administrative neglect and corruption. 6 years later, the region has come a long way, and Delta State is one of the leading performers in infrastructural development. Leveraging on its position as one of Nigeria's largest oil-producing states, the state government has embarked on ambitious infrastructure projects that will help diversify its economy and eliminate its dependence on oil. In order to drive the growth of industrial activities and spur development in sectors like manufacturing and agriculture, the state is bringing in the private sector to invest in large projects such as its special economic zones, namely the Cocoa Free Trade Zone, the Warri Industrial Business Park, and the Asaba ICT Park. However, the reality is that projects like these will not go far without basic infrastructure like power, good roads, and efficient transport systems, areas that can be improved on in the state. The state governor says infrastructure development is a key element of his three-point agenda, which includes peace and security and human capital development. And in order to address the infrastructure deficit that exists in the state today, he aims to build on the foundation laid by the previous administration.
The challenge we have in Nigeria today, especially for industries, is that of power. A lot of companies spend up to 45% of their working capital just on power alone, buying generators, servicing generators, buying fuel for generators. And if we take this off them, of course, they will be more attracted to developing, to bringing their industries to Delta. We've started our own independent power plant, which initially will generate between 100 and 120 megawatts. Because it is modular, we can gradually step it up to 450 megawatts, which combined with what is coming from the federal government will just be enough. Because what we did was to first of all get a generation license from the federal government. That means what we are generating, we can utilize it within the state. Then the second part is the transmission. We've been involved in putting up transmission lines, although this is an entire responsibility of the federal government. But once you put up the transmission line, it goes as a federal infrastructure. Then the third part is the distribution, which involves, again, a lot of distribution facilities, such as transformers and local wiring. And we bought a lot of transformers, a lot of transformers, from the big ones to the very small ones, which we're installing in the part. Hopefully, with all these ones being completed, it will improve the power supply of the state tremendously.
Considering the large cost of these projects, meeting the huge infrastructural needs of its people is not an easy task, one made harder after floods ravaged the state mid-last year. The floods, triggered by unusually heavy rainfall and the opening of the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon, are the worst in Nigeria in half a century. According to the National Emergency Management Agency, over 700,000 people in the state were displaced and an estimated 150 killed as a result of the floods. Today, thousands are forced to reside in makeshift accommodations and relief camps provided by the state's Emergency Relief Agency, of course, after their homes were submerged and livelihoods lost. According to the state government, over 50,000 farms and 16,000 residential and commercial property was lost, costing the state 9.6 billion naira.
I know. When it occurred, 14 local governments out of the 25 local governments we had were affected. Hundreds of communities, at the last count, about 380 communities. Thousands of persons were displaced. And farmlands were washed away, houses were destroyed, school premises destroyed, infrastructure generally in a very bad state. The roads were cut off. I'll give you a typical example. From here to a place we call Kwale, which would have taken ordinarily about 30 minutes, between 20 to 30 minutes from Asaba. We couldn't access it because somewhere between Ogwashuku and Kwale, the road was totally cut off.
For those living in the temporary relief camps, the onus is on the government to find a quick solution to the infrastructural devastation caused by these floods. While the state received a 500 million naira grant from the federal government, that number isn't nearly enough to tackle the immense gap left behind. The state government set up a post-flood technical committee made up of experts from various disciplines to assess the impact of the floods and advise on ways to mitigate its impact on the people. Some of the short-term recommendations include the rehabilitation of failed sections of roads and bridges and the reconstruction of damaged buildings and supplying of farming materials. Over the long term, the state plans to construct flood walls, flood dispersion and diversion structures, dams, and the dredging of the River Niger. This report has been presented to the United Nations this year, and the state is expecting a team who will carry out a post-flood study. However, for the thousands affected by the flood, the question is how soon will these measures be put in place?
As I did say, what was essentially holding back the putting up of these physical structures on ground was the report we were expecting. Now we have received the report 2 days ago. Government definitely will swing into action. We don't have anything delaying us again. We are no longer speculating. Now we have a concrete information on what had happened, the depth of the devastation, what should be done, areas where these things should be done, where the intensity is, and where we should apply our measures.
But as citizens of the state await for the rehabilitation and flood repair to kick off, the execution of several of the state's infrastructural programs continues. Delta State's Ministry of Works, which is tasked with the provision of effective and sustainable road networks, is driving the construction of several roads as well as sewage and drainage systems. The State Commissioner of Works says that though the floods did set back some of its urban projects, the work will go on.
Naturally, the water is acidic, okay, and it's not a friend to asphalt. All right, so we have a lot of damages. Major damages, roads were cut off. The flood was very pathetic, and we managed to survive it. But the aftermath of the flood is that we need to do much to now upgrade, repair, reconstruct, and maintain those affected parts of the roads. We are supervising two aspects of it. See, some major drainages are being done by the Ministry of Environment, supervised by the Ministry of Works. Then minor drainages that go along with the roads are done by Ministry of Works. Now, these are the two aspects of it. The intention is to ensure that the roads that we are constructing have integrity, the roads are sustainable, even after Dr. Don has completed his 2 terms of governance.
The ministry says work on its urban renewal projects in the Asaba and Warri metropolis, such as the provision of streetlights on major roads, will continue. But more importantly, the ministry is creating the road networks that will link and integrate the remote rural and riverine communities to the urban centers to promote economic activities in these areas.
The dream of data beyond oil cannot be done without first integrating the entire state. So in that aspect, we are constructing roads to link the rural areas with the urban and rural areas properly linked. That's one. Second is that we also constructing roads to open up rural areas that are agricultural belts. There are food, to evacuate food from the rural areas to the urban areas for purpose of commercial activities.
Most of these projects will be complete in the next 2 years, opening up Delta State as a gateway to eastern Nigeria and a hub of business activities in the country. But financing remains a challenge as the ministry needs an additional 2 billion naira to complete their work on these roads.
Delta has several towns which we develop. Unlike other states that has only one city, and then they pour all the money they have there. So when you go there, they show you only that city. But you will find here that if you travel around this state, you can't cover it in a day.
Sourcing financing for these infrastructural programs is not the only challenge, but a key concern for investors is the sustainability and maintenance of these projects once they are complete. Delta State says its legislative arm will play the role of ensuring that the government delivers on its promises by creating laws such as the Fiscal Responsibility Law and Public-Private Partnership Law that will guarantee the safety of these projects in the long run.
We also have other things coming up, of course, like you have Warren Industrial Park and all of that. By the time that comes in place, we'll put an enabling law, particularly the public-private partnership law, because some of these things will have to go into partnership with the the private sector. And in going into partnership, we need to give them an enabling law that will enable them participate and protect their investments beyond this administration and other administrations to come. And therefore, they must have a law that they'll believe in. And this is the role of the legislature. It is our duty to put that law in place and ensure that the investors' funds are secured, and also ensure that everybody feels happy.
Following the floods, the legislators stepped in and worked with the state government to sign into law the Emergency Management Agency Bill that would address flood issues and other natural disasters in the future.
And the law seeks first and foremost. First is an agency that doesn't cost government any extra funds, because its key staff is drawn from within the circles of the government. You have an emergency management committee, which is headed by the Commissioner for Bureau for Special Duties, and of course representatives of the Secretary to Government and all justice down the line. The same vein you have is agencies to be run by a permanent secretary, which is also drawn from within the executive arm of government. So these are persons who can take decisions when critical times come.
Now, the state government says that it has identified long and short-term solutions that will fix the damages left behind by the floods and spur on infrastructural renewal programs. But after the break, we will examine a unique ministry, the Ministry of Special Infrastructure, put in place to make sure that specific projects are achieved in key sectors, such as this road right here, built on swampy land and sandfilled to create this. We'll give you more after the break.